Well, I'll level with you, Curt. I tried to run, the goal was to see if I could run the distance equivalent to 100 marathons barefoot.
Wow.
So I wasn't doing a marathon every day, but it was the way of describing the distance. So I was setting out to try and run 100 marathons over the course of, I was going to be on this journey for 5.5 months.
Episode 1074. The adventure of running nearly 100 marathons in 150 days barefoot. Welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast again today. I am so excited about our guest. I'm not going to say her name yet, but she's been on the show multiple times years ago, and she's back today to catch us up on so many adventures. And I actually had Grok AI create an intro, so I'm going to read that just for fun. Grok did a great job. It says, "Welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast, where we dive into the wild and inspiring world of adventure. Today, we're thrilled to have Anna McNuff, a fearless adventurer, best-selling author, and self-proclaimed restless mama. From running 2,352 miles barefoot across Britain to cycling the Andes and beyond, Anna's epic journeys and infectious passion for the unknown have inspired countless dreamers to chase their own adventures. Buckle up for a conversation packed with grit, humor, and stories that'll make you want to lace up or maybe go barefoot and hit the road." So that is what Grok has to say about you, Anna. What do you think?
Oh, I love it. Me and Grok are going to be best friends. Nailed it.
Well, and I did not prompt Grok at all. I just said, give me an intro for Anna McNuff. That's it. So Grok was able to get that much off the web, and it knows you like your brother.
Yeah, it really does.
Well, welcome. I'm so glad to have you back on the Adventure Sports Podcast.
Oh, honestly, I love coming on to chat to you. It's brilliant. It's been a while. It's definitely been a while. That means lots of adventures have happened. But yeah, I'm so stoked to be back. Thank you.
Well, it's going to be fun to catch up. Now, Anna, I'm going to wing it here. I did not write this down and I did not research it, except for a couple of things we talked about. But I'm going to tell people what I remember. Okay. So your parents were Olympians.
They were well remembered. Absolutely.
And at uni, you started trying to do crew, and you did that for a while. Am I right?
I did. You are right. Gold star for
And
that
then
one.
I don't remember if it was an injury or just a lack of interest, but you decided to go on to other major sports.
It was that I failed to make the 2008 Olympics. I failed to make that team, which was one of the greatest failures in my life. I'm so grateful that I did not make that Olympics, because in the end, I was done. I was done with the sport. Rowing crew is so intense. And by that point, I was early 20s. I was done with the sport, and I realised that I had this massive wanderlust. And so it led me into a life of adventure. So not making it as an Olympic athlete, even though I was a GB athlete, I was then able to use my kind of love of pushing my body in a different way to see the world and to slow it down a bit as well. I like going slow. I like stopping for tea and cake, all of that good stuff, smelling the roses. So I'm very grateful. But yeah, it led me to a life of adventure. But I didn't do my first big adventure until I was 28. So I was pretty late to the party.
Well, and you've done several huge adventures. So you biked through all 50 U.S. states.
I did.
You ran the length of New Zealand, both islands, right?
Yes, which was beautiful.
Say the trail for me, because I mess it up every time.
The Te Araroa Trail, yeah.
Okay, and fantastic stories about that. Matter of fact, isn't that a lot of the content of your first book?
Yes, it is. Yeah, The Pants of Perspective, that book's called. It's about that journey. It's a 2,000-mile trail. And yeah, I ran it with all my stuff on my back, solo, unsupported. I think I was the first woman to do it, to run that trail, south to north. So it was an amazing. It was like a coming of age story, that one. I'm very grateful to that journey.
Well, and then you decided that you were going to do the Andes Mountains with a kick bike, but then realized that the kick bike just wasn't going to cut it. So you ended up using a bicycle.
It doesn't go up hills, Curt. Kick bikes, they just don't go up hills. So yeah, we did it on a good old fashioned bicycle. And that one was with someone else. That one was with a friend as well. So again, that journey was, every journey's different, isn't it? But that one really became about the friendship between me and Faye, the other woman I went with, because we lived in each other's pockets for 6 months and we cycled
Right.
5,500 miles and went through all sorts together. So that was a beautiful journey.
Well, and then you've run barefoot the length of Britain. And that's crazy. We're going to talk about that one a lot today because we haven't talked about it before. And I also have so many questions about it. But I have to say, you took on a much, much bigger adventure than that since the last time we talked. You now have 3 kids.
I have 3 small children. I have a 4-year-old, a girl, and then I have 2-year-old twins. And hand on my heart, that is harder than any of that stuff you have listed off. Is honestly, you don't know it until you're in it, but parenting is the hardest. I mean, obviously the most joyful thing. So there's so many synergies there between parenting and adventures, but it is. I mean, I now relish the days when I would run a marathon with no shoes on and have a good 10 hours solid sleep. You know, I would love that sleep. But you just got to crack on and push through. So yeah, I'm in the thick of it at the moment with my 3 beautiful kids.
Oh, that is so great. And it's especially challenging, I think, when they double up on you with the twins.
I mean, how rude. Unbelievable. I mean, I should have known it was coming because I have got twins in my family. And I'm an older mum. I didn't have my twins till I was 38. So the chances were pretty high of having twins, but it just hadn't occurred to me. So that was a shock. But yeah, what a blessing. They're amazing. They're hilarious.
Well, Anna, knowing you, I'm going to say this, okay?
Yeah.
In American football, if someone is a really, really good rusher or something like that, sometimes they'll put double coverage to stop that person, to slow them down because they know it'll take 2 against 1. So I think life did that for you because they knew you could handle it.
Yeah, I think, and honestly, I would say the last, especially the last 3 years, have been the hardest of my entire life, and I don't put that lightly. You know, that is. So I definitely feel like I'm out the other side of it now, but that really felt like that's what's happened. It's like, okay, you think you can run up mountains, think you can cycle across country. Here, have almost 3 kids under the age of 2 is what I had. I was a month off having that. Yeah, oh my goodness. But I'm here and I'm still loving adventure, and yeah, we're finally starting to get out there a bit more as a family, so it's awesome.
Oh, that's great. So
Episode
Anna,
1074.
it was one of
The adventure of running nearly 100 marathons in 150 days barefoot.
Prepare you for being a mom and having these 3 wonderful kids.
I think that's a really good question. I think the adventures prepare you, and the greatest thing that I learned from adventures is that nothing is forever. So even if you have a terrible day, a terrible week, a terrible month, it will pass. That is one thing I learned on adventures, because there is so much up and down. You know, if there's anything you can rely on in an adventure, it's that it will change in an hour, a day, whenever. And that means that if you're having an awesome time and everything's going beautifully, then you also know that there's some dark times coming, and that's cool. And it works the flip side as well. So that I've taken into motherhood. The other thing is this idea of chunking. You know, they talk about breaking things down. So when I was in New Zealand, if I had a 40K day or like a marathon day to run, I'd only think about running 5 miles at a time, because that's what my brain could cope with. And
Yeah.
I'd go, I'll run 5 miles, and then I'd finish the 5 miles, and then I'd almost just shake it all loose and go, okay, I'm going to run the next 5 miles. And it's weird because in motherhood it is the same thing, and that comes in the form of, okay, just got to make it to them being 6 weeks old or 3 months old or whatever it is. But especially with the twins, I don't know. I mean, you would have never seen what a 20. I've got this picture of a whiteboard of a 24-hour schedule of what happened when you've got twins, and
Oh, wow.
fed when, and it's insane. You are going 24 hours round the clock, and the most sleep you'll get is 90 minutes, and that probably goes on for 3 months. And me and my partner Jamie, we were sleeping on the sofa downstairs, because we got one that was on twin watch and the other one was up in the bed upstairs, and then we'd swap every 2 hours. We'd do these shifts, and so we were all It sounds mad, but getting through those 2-hour chunks, and then we would always be together as the sun came up and the sun would sneak through the curtains. And I just remember that feeling of, yes, we have made it through another 24 hours. And then I'd have a moment and think, oh my gosh, but there's no celebration. It just carries on.
It just keeps going.
Yeah, but I think that knowledge that there will, and it's that weird collision of, it's so hard, but at the same time, you know that you want to hold on to it in some kind of way, especially at the age the kids are at now, 2 and 4. They are so funny. They are so cute. They're just watching them discover the world, even though it's still difficult. I want to pause time and hold on to it. And that's how I always felt on my adventures. I always felt like I can't wait for the finish line, but equally I want to dance in this moment forever. I just want to just pick and choose and be able to pause and fast forward when I want, but you can't do that in life. So many synergies between adventure and motherhood, definitely.
I'll share a little something. I think I may have shared this years and years ago, but when I was 10, my family took an extended car trip, a vacation through the U.S., the Western U.S. We went to the Rocky Mountains, of course, and to Yellowstone and lots of places. But here's the point. Before we went, my parents gave my sister and I just a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And said, get something for the trip. So I bought a tiny little pair of binoculars. And my sister bought the tiniest little camera that you could get.
Yeah.
And it was just a plastic little camera. So on this trip, she took pictures and I looked. When we got home, I would talk to my sister and I'd say, you remember this place when we saw this and did that? And she'd go, no. And then she got the photos developed because it was not digital photography back then.
Yeah.
When she pulled the photos out of the envelope, she goes, oh, this is what you're talking about. What's the point? I took the time to look.
Yeah.
And when it comes to remembering what your kids are like at this age or any age, it's when you take the time to look.
Yeah.
Especially at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, remember the antics and the funny moments. Remember all the little dramas that happen and say, okay, I'm locking that one in. I'm going to remember that when I'm 65.
Yeah. And just like you said, there are times when, and this happens on adventures as well, when everything is so perfect, like it's like this moment has just been created, and it's like time is moving in slow motion. Like we've got this amazing, there's this beautiful wisteria plant in our garden which has got these white kind of drooping petals off it, and it's just flowering now. And just the other day, it was evening time, the beautiful golden hour, the petals are drooping, my kids are playing in a sandpit, and those moments, I just slow down and I think, wow. But then it's gone. But I am really appreciating it. But you're so right. You've got to take the time to actually look, because that, time just moves on so quickly. But all we've got is right now in this moment. And I find that adventures bring me that as much as motherhood does. So it's a good one.
Many people have told me that's the reason why they do their sport, is so they can get into the now.
Yes.
Because it takes something almost jarring sometimes, a little bit extreme.
Yeah.
To be able to get that level of focus.
Yeah.
And some people are really good at it just in everyday life, but some people are like, I really find my groove when I'm on the rock face or in the 25th mile of a marathon.
Yeah.
I've heard these stories over and over again. And anyway, it's one of the reasons why I do adventure for sure. It's nice to be able to corral the thoughts and focus on something, right?
Yeah.
And then get into the moment.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but I have a very busy, what I'm calling, my background's in psychology, so like a front brain, a very busy front brain that is always on. And sometimes
what, you?
Me, never. Unbelievable. Me, no. But of course, it takes you out of your body. You spend your whole
Yes.
time living in your head, and you're right. What sports do is they put you back in your body, and that's beautiful. And again, watching that in kids, so many times we're getting much better at it now. But we say to our kids, "Oh, this is happening at the weekend, or this is happening next week," and realize what we've just done. We've just taken them out of. They live 100% in the moment, and
Right.
and it also means they wake up really early the next day because they're so excited and they have no concept of time. But they teach me great lessons about living in the moment. But I absolutely agree that it does.
Well, we would probably all do well to practice that. My youngest son, I'll say, "Hey, what are you thinking about?" And he'll say, "Nothing." And finally, we had a conversation about that. And I said, "Well, what are you thinking about when you say you're thinking about nothing?" And he says, "No, really, it's nothing."
Oh,
I looked at him and I said, "What?
yeah,
I cannot do that. I don't think I've ever had that experience." And Anna, I bet you're like me. That's probably not an easy thing to do.
I'm trying to solve 15 problems at once is what I'm doing, or thinking
Yes.
about that thing that I really don't need to be thinking about, but in a good way. And I'm so excited and I want to plan it. That's yeah.
Yeah, but isn't that a delight as well?
Oh, I love
It's
it. Yeah.
and sometimes it takes a good adventure to kind of turn that off, but that's not for everybody, but that's for some of us. And speaking of good adventures, let's transition. You ran how far barefoot in Britain?
Well, I'll level with you, Curt. I tried to run, the goal was to see if I could run the distance equivalent to 100 marathons barefoot.
Wow.
So I wasn't doing a marathon every day, but it was the way of describing the distance. So I was setting out to try and run 100 marathons over the course of, I was going to be on this journey for 5.5 months. And the big goal behind it was I'm a Girl Guiding ambassador in the UK, which is, I guess, kind of like Girl Scouts, basically, but it's our biggest organisation. There's over 300,000 young women in this charity in the UK. So I'd become an ambassador, and my role as like a media role was to try and encourage more women into the organisation and volunteers and try and get them doing more adventurous stuff. So on this run, I had so many layers to it. I was trying to run this 100 marathons. I was speaking in 3 Girl Guiding units per week. So I'd run the all day, and then I'd go into the unit in the evening, and I'd tell stories to the girls about adventure. And
While you're exhausted.
while I'm exhausted, I had an inflatable globe that I pulled out my backpack and I threw it around the room. And then I was also being hosted. I didn't have a support crew. So it was just me running with a little pack, and then my bag was being passed along by the general public like a baton. And then I was staying in the homes of strangers. So I'd put out an email with like social media posts about 6 months before the adventure began, saying, "This is my route, this is my schedule." There was a spreadsheet and everything, a very bright spreadsheet, but there was a spreadsheet. And I said, "I'm going to be running through these areas. Was anyone up for hosting me or helping ferry my bag along?" And that's basically what I did. So I was staying in strangers' homes. I was doing all these talks. And in the end, so I level with you. I didn't make it the full 100 marathon distance. I only made it the equivalent of 90 marathons. So I fell short. But at the same time, it was...
You got 90% the way to an impossible goal.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what it was about. It was almost setting it so crazy. I mean, it had to, and this is the cynical part, it had to have a hook to get the media interested. So basically, I told Jamie, who's he's run across Canada and done all these crazy things. This is my other half, my partner. And I said to him that I was thinking of doing the distance of 50 barefoot marathons. And I remember I'd built up so much courage to tell him. And I remember him just taking, this was a Sunday morning when I told him, and he took a sip of his coffee. And I said, "You like the idea?" He said, "Oh, love it. I love it." And then he just took a sip of coffee and said, 100 marathons sounds better though, Anna. And I went, "Oh, oh," and that was it. So it was just set as crazy. But that's what I was trying to talk to the girls about. I was saying, you've got to just go for it, shoot for the stars, land on the moon. And here I am trying, and it's a complete mess. At one point I got a really bad foot injury that kept me off the road for 3 weeks, and I didn't know if the run was over, and that was 1,000 miles in. So yeah, it did everything an adventure should.
Okay, we need to dig into details on that one because I'm super curious. But one sideline, because you just expressed it very, very well. I believe in setting goals that are not achievable. And people might say, now yours arguably may have been achievable by someone like you, not by someone like me, but if you set a goal that's a really lofty goal and someone might say, well, I could never do that, why try? Some goals improve your life so much in the attempt. It's like, I may never get to the destination, but the journey's worth it.
Yeah.
But that's my guiding star. I'm going for that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's so much to be said for even going through the process of allowing yourself to think the idea through to the point where you would even write it down or tell someone. Because one of the things I do on the sides I run, I volunteer and run this thing called Adventure Queens, which is, it's a community of 15,000 women now. It's been going for 7 years, and we do a grant every year and to send a UK woman on some adventures. But we get a couple of hundred applications and only give out 3 grants. But the feedback we get from the people who write those applications is that they've gone off, a lot of them, and done it anyway because we've made them commit it to paper. And it's quite a detailed form, how are you going to afford it? What's the logistics? What will you be giving up to do this? Why? How will you share it? All of these things. So like you said, actually in the process of making them set that lofty goal, they end up going for it, or at least part way.
That's really, really wonderful. Okay, why barefoot? Some people would say barefoot Ted.
Yeah, Barefoot Ted, exactly. I emailed him. At some point very excitedly. Why barefoot? Well, and this is what you were saying about lofty goals, and that that wouldn't have been a goal for you, but it was one relatively not too crazy for me, because I'd already run the length of New Zealand with my shoes on. Okay, so bearing in mind, I know this sounds crazy, but put yourself in the mindset of, I've done a 2,000-mile run in trainers. Not only that, gnarly backcountry, crossed rivers, all of that stuff. So with this run, I thought, I could run through Britain, 100 marathons, with my shoes on. And I just, being honest, I didn't think it would be easy, but I thought, far from it, but I thought I can do it. I know I can do it. I could do that. And then this just little thought entered my head of, well, if I'm going to be talking to the girls about doing things that make them feel terrified, or that mixture of excited and terrified, that beautiful little 50%.
The big challenge.
The big one. Then I've got to walk the walk. I've got to be authentically doing something that I'm not, there is a high chance of failure. And that's why I suddenly had this idea. I'd read Born to Run, and I'd been in minimalist shoes for a while, and I thought, well, first of all, why don't I do it barefoot? And then I thought, that's crazy. And then I thought, but is that crazy? Really? Why is that crazy? And I just explored it a bit, and I thought, well, it's crazy because I've grown up in Britain where everyone wears shoes. That's why it's crazy. In other parts of the world, it's not crazy. People live their lives barefoot. It's crazy because I might step on smashed glass because I'm running through cities. So I just thought about everything, and I thought there is a chance it's possible. It's whether it's possible for me is another matter, but it's possible. So
it will change your gait, and people would argue for the better.
Yes. Oh, and that was it. I took it the most seriously of all my adventures, in that I spent the longest I ever had, 18 months preparing. I went and met with a gait specialist who said to me, this is the way, yes, you have the type of running stride that is good for ultra runners, which is the shuffle, the low shuffle. You don't bounce. You don't bounce at all. There's no bounce. But he also said to me, these are the things you need to do to reduce the loading through your hip and knee joints to minimize your risk of injury, because that was my big thing. I said, I don't need to go fast. I'm not breaking records here. I just need to make it to the finish line and up my chances of doing it as long as I can, basically. And I did. I took his advice, and we measured the loading through my joints as well as we went on. And it went down from like 40% less loading the more I changed my my gait as I ran.
Well, can you describe it? People are going to be curious.
Yeah,
how is it different?
He said, so it's like how like a swan swims. So they're very smooth on the top, and yet their feet are going underneath. So when you're running barefoot or in minimalist shoes, you tend to run with a more bended knee, because your that's your natural shock absorbers. You're not getting that shock absorption from any footwear. So, and it's not, people think that when you run barefoot, you toe strike like this, but actually what you're doing is you're doing a very tiny toe tap and then heel. So it's quite a flat placement, and that means the shock gets spread quite evenly rather than being in any one place on your foot. So he sent me out to almost do this, he called it a funny walk, where you would bend your knees and just try and keep your shoulders level and shuffle your feet underneath you. This is where video is great for this. I'm showing you. This is what so I would do this funny walk to over exaggerate the style of running. And then what I ended up with was a very low impact running style where I wasn't wasting any energy going up and down. All of my energy was forward and as light as possible on my joints and hips and knees and stuff like that. And I only got, I mean, the show stopping injury I picked up was actually a cut. The only muscular injury I had in those 2,300 miles was I had 1 day off for a sore calf, and that was it. So it worked.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that insane? That's crazy. I had more days off in New Zealand running with trainers on. That's probably because I was trying to run faster and stuff like that. But yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the surface. Were you running on asphalt? Were you running on grass, trail? How did you pick your route?
Well, and this is another thing with adventures. You start with a plan and then you do the thing, and you quite often have to change the plan or adjust it. And I thought that I was going to be exclusively on trails. I thought surely the best place to be for my feet is our soft, and I thought all trails are soft in my head. But then I'd forgotten about gravel. I'd forgotten about when the mud on the trail has had cows on it and it's carved up into this kind of waves.
Oh my.
And the sun gets on it and it's hardened, and all the thistles and the grass and just all of the spiky stuff that nature has to offer us. I'd forgotten about all of that. So some trails were amazing. If I got pine forest or a beautiful grassy trail or sandy beach, amazing. But unless I was on that surface, I actually tended to then start to pick small, quiet backcountry roads because, and this is really geeky, where the cars go down a backcountry road, the traffic's light, so hardly any cars came along anyway. So I felt safe running on them. But I could run in the section where the wheels had worn down the tarmac and it was really smooth. So
yeah,
I basically went for a mixture of, I changed my route as I went along, looking for sandy beaches, looking for pine forest, and looking for quiet country back roads. And tried to avoid gravel. But of course, I still came across it and it just reduced me to a hobble. I never got to the point where I could skip over gravel despite my aims.
Oh, I can't imagine. And the other thing is, you could not run on tarmac in a lot of places in the U.S. and the West, especially because it gets to be it's not a joke when people say you can fry an egg on that. It will fry on that.
I had.
You'll get third-degree burns.
Yeah, I had it. I had only a taster of it in Scotland. They had a heat wave in Scotland, which, if you're British and listening to this, is just a joke because Scotland's known for being really cold and rainy. But I had a heat wave, and I was really struggling that day. I'm really bad with my conversion, but it was 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. But it was hot, and the tarmac was, it was really hot, and I was having to spit water onto my soles to try and keep my soles cool, and I couldn't pause to set the camera up or anything because it was just too hot. So yes, you're right. I'm not going to be running through Death Valley with no shoes on. It would be impossible.
Yeah, Mason, the previous host.
Yeah,
I'm the previous host, and Mason is a previous host. Yeah. Mason was going through Death Valley on his bike, and he stopped to rest, and a police officer approached him and said, "Is that your buddy back there?" And it wasn't, thankfully. But this fellow had heat stroke or something, but he had come off his bike onto the tarmac, and he didn't make it. He cooked.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
So that's how dangerous it really can be if you're in a hot place.
Yeah. No.
So
absolutely.
anyway.
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't get much of that.
I didn't get much of that. No, Britain's quite good for that, and then that we don't tend to have too much extreme weather. Everyone goes crazy when there's a flood and there's about 2 centimeters of water sometimes. It's not like the US in that sense.
Well, what an amazing feat. Okay, we have to dig into some of the questions. What was it doing to you over the days and weeks to know I'm going to run again tomorrow? Here I go again tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because in the end, that was the hardest thing, was the mental fatigue. Physically, you know, I was tired, but my body had got to a point where I was on cruise control. You know, I knew what I had to do. It was okay. And like I said, I wasn't struggling with any muscular injuries or anything like that. It was my brain. It was, and this was pre-motherhood, so I now understand mental fog. But I remember once I was trying to order, we call it a jacket potato in the UK, but a baked potato. I was trying to order this potato in a cafe, and I could not remember the name for a potato. And I was trying to describe it. I said it's fluffy, it's got skin, and she was going, a chicken. I said no, put butter in it. And then she eventually said, like, baked potato, and I said yes, that's it. And it was my that was about a month from the finish line, so I've been running for 5 months. And I think it was just all of the logistics, all of the organizing every day of all these 3 talks a week, staying with hosts, making sure I was leaving one host, thanking them, trying to message the next one, and trying to plan 3 days ahead of that. It all just ground my brain to a halt. It felt like I was having loads of sleep, but you know, when you get sleep deprived and your brain just gets clogged up and you just cannot think straight. That
Yeah.
was the point. I felt like I was in my body, but I was not there anymore. And of course, I had lots of open running stages. So by that I mean I'd put on, there were 80 stages where people could sign up and come and run with me. And I had about, over the course of it, about 2,500 people come out and run sections
Oh,
with me.
that's wonderful.
It was amazing, and they were having their own mini adventures. But of course, I had groups of like 15 people turning up, and apparently I was very coherent. But I remember feeling like I'm just not here. I was just gone. I was exhausted, and I don't think I will ever do anything as hard ever again. It definitely pushed me right to the edge. But again, it was amazing. I don't regret it for a second, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Well, you keep coming back for more. You've done amazing adventures over and over, and you always say, "Well, I'll never do that again." And then I know that you're going to do something again. It
Yes,
won't be
I
that
will.
long.
Yeah, and I think that's what I realized about after I had the kids. I was thinking, oh, you know, maybe my adventures have changed anyway. They have changed, and they've changed because I've wanted them to. But you cannot keep that fire down inside of you. That, you know, the thing that lights you up, and what lights me up is being halfway up a mountain, or even if it's a hill, whatever I can get, just being close to nature and using my body. Yeah, and I just, even though I've not done as much of it in the last few years with the kids, it's the first place I go to. It's my happy place. So yes, there will be more. There's cold places, there's swimming, there's all of it to come.
So much.
Yeah.
Well, for people like you, Anna, that find such a reward and so much joy in big adventure, putting that on the shelf for a little bit to do the bigger adventure that I already talked about with the children. But have you found that to be a little bit of an emotional challenge to say, "Oh, I don't have the big thing now"?
Yeah, it's really weird because I mean, I didn't know how I would feel, but I thought that I would still want to go and do really big adventures having had the kids. But as soon as I had Storm, our first girl, I just, much as it was hard, I didn't want to be away from her for extended periods of time. And so I was completely at peace with that, because I thought, well, I can do, but I don't want to do that anymore. So that was strange. I was thinking, wow, there's this little human that I love more than big adventures. That's awesome. Then when the twins came along, and there's 3, I think the biggest struggle I had is I'm no longer at the moment searching for these huge 6-month, 4-month adventures. But what I would love is 2 days or 24 hours where it's easy for me. I don't have to think about, you know, putting 10 different layers of childcare into place, and I don't have to work so hard to just carve out even a day of time, or even an hour to go for a run can sometimes be a challenge. So I think that's the most difficult thing. It's that I'm at my best, and I'm my best self when I get that time, but trying to find that balance between making sure my kids get what they need, making sure I get what they need, making sure everyone's looked after, is really, it's really difficult. And I think I've realized it's not oh, I'll just get used to this and solve the problem. It's an ongoing daily thing that now exists. And it is, and the other thing I realized is I love adventuring with the kids, and they're now just starting to get to that point where they're old enough for us to start doing slightly longer things. And we did a bike trip across France. It was only 10 days with Storm, my eldest, when she was 18 months old, and we just had a blast. We had a blast. So it was lovely to realize I can now do this stuff with my kids and share the love of it, really.
Well, I can attest to that. You know, my wife's name is Ann.
Yeah.
And Ann and I have 4 kids, and our youngest turned 21 this year.
That's correct.
And so, you know, we're officially no longer parenting.
Yeah, well,
but we're still parents, right?
Yeah, of course.
But all of that said,
yeah,
many of the things that I loved to do when I was single, I started to almost feel like, well, this is starting to feel really normal or regular or not as exciting. And then when our children got old enough that they could do these things with me, it took on a brand new excitement. And I loved it so much the more because I could share it with these little people that I love so much. And I have to say, Anna, as your children grow and do more and more with you, it's going to like double the reward. It's like, yeah, this was fun when I did it by myself, but holy cow, this is so great now.
Yeah.
So, and that's still ahead of you, really.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the big examples for me was downhill skiing. I had skied so much that honestly, I was starting to get bored. I know that avid skiers say, "Is that even possible?" I think it was for me.
Yeah.
But whenever I started teaching my kids to ski, we had so much fun. So much fun. And then came the backpacking trips and then the mountain biking and the climbing the 14ers. And it's just the joy of it to be able to do it with your own, you know? Yeah. So look forward to that. It's going to be so great.
That's great. That's really lovely to hear that. That does feel, because I've got all this hope for it. And some people are, that if you're not constantly surrounded by adventurous people, sometimes you get people going, oh, just wait until they're this age and then they won't want to do it anymore. And I'm just so full of hope of they'll always somehow will work out adventures together. So that's really lovely to hear. I remember you doing the 14ers. I remember that story. Yeah. Remember that, thinking that was so cool.
There's so many stories, and I don't want to bore people with it's about you today, not about me. But I will say this: as your children age, increase their responsibility and allow them to make their own decisions and lead with love, and especially during the teenage years. For everyone out there, I'm no expert, but this worked for us. It's like a dog that's on a very long leash that doesn't even know it's on a leash, but if it jumps in front of the garbage truck, you can still pull it out of the way.
That's so yeah.
Believe in your kids. They can do it, and they have to experience life, and they have to learn their own self-reliance and autonomy. So invest that in them and lead in love, and you'll still be there to help if they make a big mistake, but let them suffer a little bit from the mistakes they do make. That's all a part of what adulting is about. So lead with love, and your kids will always want to adventure with you, Anna.
Yeah, well, I'm so with you on that philosophy. We've always, ever since they were born, tried to treat them as equal. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but in many ways, because they need so much looking after, but they have a will. They have such a strong will, especially as toddlers. And my 4-year-old, I remember my mum saying to me at some point, saying like, well, how will she let you know what she really wants? I said, have you heard my 4-year-old express her opinion? And you're so right. I think sometimes as very ambitious people, we want to make things perfect and we want to fix things and do it for them. And I know I have to hold myself back on the daily from even they're trying to clip something shut. And I'm going, don't step in, Anna. Like, give them the rod, but don't give them the fish. Like, just
there you go.
Let them do it. Yeah, I'm with you.
So I know that you have some dreams for other adventures. Do you have any that you'd be willing to share?
Yes. So, and this is a bit crazy, but you've caught me at a really crazy time. We've got some smaller adventures over the summer, and we're trying to work out how to get all 5 of us on a little bike trip again through France. So we're looking at various options for wagons and tag-alongs and all that kind of stuff. That's the sort of mini stuff. But we are actually, and this is a bit mad, our house is going on the market tomorrow. This isn't an attempt to sell my home, by the way. This isn't advertising. But we have decided that because both me and my partner, Jamie, we make a lot of our income from books and things that are online, and we don't have to be in one place. And we're both very adventurous. And we are going to basically become nomadic or semi-nomadic for a few years, see how it goes, and give up our home, and maybe buy somewhere else and rent it out or something like that. But there's spreadsheets again going on. But yeah, we're about to do a massive decision as a family to say we've done the traditional life for 5 years. We've stayed in one place. The world is calling. There are big adventures out there. We don't have to be in one place because of the way our lives are set up. Let's go and explore it and just have adventures as a family and see where life takes us from there. So it's a bit terrifying, really. But that's where we're at.
Well, that one will be fascinating, especially to see how your kids do with it.
Yes, and that's it. It's going to be a two-way street. I want them to be, I don't want to be doing stuff they don't want to be doing. So it's going to be a constant balance of, making sure they're enjoying wherever we are in the world or whatever we've got planned next.
That sounds like an amazing life experience as a family. That is so cool.
Yeah.
When Travis and I originally sold the podcast to Mason, Travis took his family on the road. And they rented out their house, but they traveled for a year and did something similar. And I asked him just about 3 weeks ago, would you do it again? He goes, oh, absolutely. He says, we've all looked back on it and said it was the best decision we ever made,
Oh, that is lovely.
And so you'll have a fantastic time with it. One thing for everyone out there with small children, the big views are kind of not their big thing necessarily. They like to look at the ants playing under the bush or the way that this flower is, they don't have to go the distance to have a great time. And sometimes their little imagination world, they'll find just the right tree and suddenly it's a castle. So as a parent, if you can enter into the adventures on that level with your children, then it'll be more rewarding for you and they'll have a better time of it too.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one. It's that balance, isn't it, of working out how to get my kicks and our kicks as adults, but also just, like you said, enter into their world. I'm with you.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
I was remembering now, you did an adventure that we haven't talked about, where you said, okay, I'm just going to go out my back gate and social media is going to tell me where to go.
Yes. And I called it Beyond My Back Gate because, I called it that. And then I realized I was living in South London at the time. I didn't actually have a back gate. So I climbed over my back fence into the park and went, woohoo, let's start. But and that again was another change in plan. I started off on foot and I was posting, I set aside a month in my diary and I said to social media, where am I going every day, left, right, or straight on? I posted 3 options basically. And then after a couple of days, I think my feet were in bits. I'd ended up walking down the side of really busy roads. It was just miserable. And so I made a big call, had a big cry. And then I thought, well, this is my adventure. I can change it. If you don't like something, change it. So I called my friend and said, can you bring my bike to me? And he said, yeah, sure, great. And then I took off on a bike after that. And I ended up going all the way through Europe, basically, across the Netherlands, through Germany, Belgium, France. And I finished in Marseille and eventually at the end of the month and put my bike on a plane and got back to the UK. But
so where's the book for that one?
Oh, it's in, I wrote a book of short stories called Bedtime Adventure Stories for Grown-Ups.
Okay.
It is a book it is a short story in there because I had all these little, I've written books about my big adventures, but I had all these little adventures that they weren't written down anywhere. And then when lockdown hit, I started writing them up and sharing them and they ended up in a book of short stories. So that's where that.
Oh, that's fun.
It's in a book.
So, hey, writing a book is an adventure in and of itself. And you've done this how many times now?
6. I've written 6, which is crazy for someone who, I don't know how you are with your energy phases, but I have incredible starter energy. I'm really good at the ideas bit, but the finishing energy is really difficult sometimes. And so, and books require so much of that, both in finishing it to actually get it to the point of being printed or on an audiobook, because I've narrated them as well, but also the finishing energy in the sense of the book launches. And then you think, well, hey, it's done. Then you think, oh my goodness, I have to tell everyone about this book now. Otherwise I'm not going to buy it except my mum. So, yeah, it's I'm proud. I'm proud of the 6 cycles of that, and I've already got material for 2 more books. I just need the time to put it all together.
Well, let's go over these books real fast, just super short. You have Barefoot Britain.
Yes.
And we've talked about that one.
Yeah.
You said bedtime adventure stories for grown-ups.
That's the book of short stories for people who can't sit still. Yeah, that's that one.
Okay. And then the United States of Adventure.
Yes, that's about the 50-state ride.
And I think I need to read that one next because I've not read it yet. And I'm just really curious. You did that in 2013.
Yes, I did. Yeah, that was my very first adventure. Yeah.
And the reason I remember the year is because of the weather. And you came through Colorado when our canyon flooded and we could not get to town for...
Yeah, and I pulled people out of a wreck.
It was like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. So anyway, and you came through Colorado at that same time. So that's why I remember the year. Llama Drama. Yes. This is the non-kick bike adventure.
Yes, that's the cycling adventure in South America, that one. Yeah.
And then the Pants of Perspective, and that's New Zealand.
Yes, and then there is a kid's book called 100 Adventures to Have Before You Grow Up. So...
Oh, that's great. 100 adventures to have before you grow up.
Yeah, that's like a reference.
Well,
yeah.
Where should people get these? Should they go to your website, or do you have a preference?
Just Amazon is the easiest place. Yeah, that's the easiest place to find them. Yeah. Or if you Google my name, they'll all pop up somewhere.
Well, and also you have a Substack venture going on.
I do. I write on Substack weekly, which is basically a platform for newsletters. So I write a weekly essay and it's called Restless Mama. And it is about it's about adventure, but sometimes the weekly essay might just be about the daily goings on in my chaotic household where both of us are adventurous spirits and we've got these 3 young kids. But yeah, it's a mixture of that. And I've got a psychology background, so there's a lot of mindset stuff in there. But that is my passion project at the moment, because every Friday I sit down and I carve out time and I write what I want to that week about a little adventure I've taken. Like I just took my 4-year-old wild camping, and it tipped with rain, so I'll write about that. Or the next week I'll be writing about something completely different. So yeah, that's called Restless Mama, and that's a weekly newsletter, and that's my passion project at the moment.
Okay, so what do you think would most compel people to jump on that newsletter and listen to or read it each week?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I always, because it's hard to say that yourself when you're writing it, isn't it? So I take it from people when they sign up, they write little recommendations and why they enjoy it so much. And a lot of the stuff I get is people are thanking me for being so honest about these struggles of being a parent or being someone who's limited on time, but having that restless, adventurous spirit. And because I share everything, I share the highs and the lows. And so I get a lot of thank you for your honesty. And then a lot of other people read it. They say they just want to feel inspired because, like we talked about earlier, my brain never stops. I'm never short of ideas. And sometimes those ideas are bonkers and hilarious, and trying to fit them in around family life, even if it's a tiny adventure, it seems to help give other people either permission or a logistical idea to go out and do something adventurous. So those are the 2 things they get: honesty, bit of humor, bit of perspective, and a lot of adventure.
You know, one of my mottos for the last few years, and I'm not very good at this is a confession. Forgive me, Anna, for I have sinned.
Lay it on me.
But my motto...
I'm listening. You will not be judged.
My motto is do what you can until you can do what you want.
Oh, I love it.
And I've been trying to do that. Regretfully, I've had a few injuries in the last few years, and I've been on the bench too much. And I'm trying to convince myself and everyone that it has nothing to do with my age. Absolutely. But I'm beginning to wonder. But anyway, if you take the time to do what you can until you can do what you want, then you never actually have to stop. You might shift gears or directions or pivot to something else, but you keep the reward cycle going, and life has meaning and is more joyful, I think.
Yeah,
So
it does. I agree with you. I like that. I'm gonna stick that on my wall, that quote. Thanks for that one.
well, man, we have already burned through almost 50 minutes, and I feel like we just barely scratched the surface. So, you know what I've not asked since I started doing the podcast again? We used to always ask this, and I want to ask it because it's one of my favorite questions. And that is, tell us about when something didn't go right on one of these adventures, some crazy thing that happened and what you learned from it.
I may have shared this story before, but the biggest one that comes to mind is I was in the middle of the New Zealand bush. So I was running this Te Araroa Trail, 2,000 miles long, and bearing in mind I grew up in London, so my navigating across landscapes was a small country park. There are trails, there's a pub on the corner, and yet here I was in New Zealand at this time, going around the side of mountains, going up and over passes, having to check weather and river crossings and make all these decisions that make you feel very empowered. But I was descending down this river in a place called the Deception Valley, and I was having to cross the river back and forth, I think something like 30 times that day, according to the crossing notes. I know, which it's just excessive, Curt. It's just excessive, to be honest. And I was crossing number 17 because I was breaking them down in my head, so I knew exactly what crossing number I was on. And I stepped out of the river, and I slipped on a slippery boulder, and I rolled my ankle. And so I was 2 days into the bush in one direction. So I could have gone those 2 days back on myself, or I could have gone 4 days forwards to the next town. And my ankle was just a mess. And I no phone signal. I had a safety tracker. I had a spot tracker at the time, GPS, so I could have pressed a big red button for a helicopter. But I was grappling in that moment between what do I do? And of course that panic of I don't know what to do. But then from somewhere, from this rock bottom, I managed to, you just find this confidence of, well, there's no one else here, Anna. No one's giving you the answer. You've got to trust yourself with this. And in the end, I decided to strap it up and push on the 4 days to the next town. And I was walking at that point. But all the time I said, if it goes right, I wasn't going too much deeper, and I was still accessible from for rescue if I needed to be. But that day just taught me that even when you get down to what you think is that rock bottom and you think it is the worst possible thing, suddenly from nowhere comes this reserve and this rush of, you've got this, because there's no other option. The only way is through. Or I could have got myself out of there, but that's such an empowering feeling. And then when you take that feeling back into everyday life, it gives you just such a perspective on what actually a problem is. The spinning beach ball of death on your Mac laptop is not a problem, even though it feels like it is most days, and you want to throw it out the window. I feel like those kinds of experiences where you think, I've been in the middle of the New Zealand bush with a busted ankle and I navigated my way out of it through the decisions I made. It just gives you a level of confidence that says, I've got this, we're good.
Yeah. You know what? I've had those sorts of experiences where I'm just stuck, injuries or what have you. And the part that I need to work on is when I get frustrated in the everyday, to stop and do what you just did. Say, no, I was in the bush in New Zealand with a busted up ankle.
Yes.
And I got through that. So I can get through this too. To take the moment to remember.
Yeah. Can
be so encouraging. I mean, that's part of the reason we do adventures.
Yeah.
But I forget to do that sometimes. I just bang my head on the wall,
That's because the chatter in our minds, I don't know about yours, but that voice is so loud. It can be so loud and so overwhelming sometimes. So I think it's difficult to quieten it. So especially when you got a racy brain, like it sounds like you have, like me. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, Anna, you know what? I want to say thank you on behalf of everyone out there who's been encouraged by you. Oh. Not only because you've done big adventures, but because you are so encouraging for people to do whatever the adventure is for them. And that encouragement changes lives. And I feel like, in a sense, we're on the same team because we both are out there promoting this thing. But what you have done for the world is make a huge difference. And I want to make this point. We never know the difference that we're making. You know, I always think about it, this kind of cerebral maybe, but you throw this stone into the space-time continuum and the waves ripple out and lives are touched and those lives touch lives and those lives, they touch lives, and you'll never know the impact that you made. And it might even be 100 years from now that you will change another life because someone's going to pick up your book, or someone's going to say, you know, I knew this person once. And so I would just want to say thank you on behalf of everyone out there. Thank you for putting the energy and the time into encouraging other people to get out there and do things that matter to them and to make their own difference in the world. You're a positive influence, and I'm very glad to have known you.
Oh, thank you, Curt. You're going to make me cry. That's so
Oh, don't
lovely.
do that.
Thank you. No, I won't. I do love a good cry. But yeah, thank you. Like, as soon as you got in touch to say, can you come back on the podcast? I absolutely, like, I always love a good chat with you, and likewise what you do for people and being in their ears for endless hours and giving them endless ideas of what they could go and do, I think is amazing. So yeah, it's an honor for me as well. So thank you.
Well, I think that's all our guests. But anyway, Anna, thank you so much for being on today. And for all the listeners out there, hey, find your adventure. Do what you can until you can do what you want, and go and do it today.